Spotlight is proudly sponsored by HEC Media, St. Louis's home for arts, education, and culture.
If one part of the city is not doing well, we're all not doing well.
He needs to up his game and create a garden for the citizens of St. Louis and the world.
I can't imagine spending a more pleasant or happy part of my life.
Today on Spotlight, at-home screening tests that could help you catch cancer early. Plus, the story of one of the greatest botanists in the world. And then the man behind the Missouri Botanical Garden. But first, Valerie Patton discusses Greater St. Louis Inc.'s inclusive business solutions. It's Sunday and you're watching the Emmy Award-winning Spotlight.
If one part of the city is not doing well, we're all not doing well. Our crime numbers are up, our education levels are low, and if you want to attract people here, if you want to grow business and attract business here, those numbers have to change.
Greater St. Louis Inc., or GSL for short, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving the metropolitan region through focused strategy and collective actions, bringing together business and civic leaders to create jobs and expand economic opportunity for all of St. Louis.
Though we are a top 20 metro today, let's shoot for being a top 10 metro where people will feel welcome and that they can have opportunity and access to whatever they need or want.
HEC Media's Dennis Riggs sat down to discuss GSL's vision and passion for the metro area with Valerie Patton, one of the group's driving forces and a longtime leader in the community. Patton grew up in North St. Louis and is committed to growing minority-owned business and bringing the community together.
I've lived on the East Coast and I've lived in the Southwest, and I've come home twice. And why? Because this is where I can make a difference.
You are the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. What is that?
I'm there to keep everybody out of trouble. I want to make sure that everybody's included, everybody has access, and that our policies, practices, and systems have an equity lens on them.
That's a big task. How do you do that?
I do it with love, passion, persistence. One of my key strengths is the ability to listen, and then being able to hopefully steer you through your own workings and through your own way of getting things done to see that difference is a good thing, not necessarily a bad thing.
There's systemic racism in the St. Louis business and economic development industry?
Absolutely. We're talking about 400 years of oppression, of systems being built that are not inclusive, do not have equity involved in them. It takes time to undo what has been done.
How do we at this point say, okay, now it ends?
You need to be able to go into actionable, sustainable solutions that really look to make changes in the system that has caused oppression over the years. So it is not a one and done. It is not let's do this educational training or let's do this. You have to work at it.
To foster diversity, sustainability, and growth, GSL developed its 2030 Jobs Plan, which aims to substantially increase the number of high-quality jobs in the area while reducing inequality.
That jobs plan will look at 5 pretty specific areas. One will be hiring and buying from minority-owned businesses. We'll be looking at becoming a talent magnet for all, so that's jobs that'll be available for all. Growing our entrepreneurial system, which is generally the startup world, but I do a lot of work in what I call the mid-tier minority business world. So these are established businesses. How do we grow, advance, and scale those businesses to create the next worldwide technology, which is the largest African American owned business in the country? How do we take those communities like the Ville in St. Louis, which has a historic Sumner High School and Annie Malone? How do we rebuild those? The Diverse Business Accelerator is a 12-week refinement program for existing minority-owned businesses with about $500,000 in revenue and at least one employee. Then we have the Fellows Experience, year-long professional leadership development, community and civic engagement, and community building.
So what you're saying is this is not just a lot of ideas bubbling around that we should do. This is stuff that is happening now.
Right.
You can be a part of it if you're watching this interview.
You can go to our website, greaterstlouisinc.com, to sign up to volunteer, because we'll have task force, we'll have councils, we'll have working groups to help us get this work done over the next 10 years. You know, everybody can play a part, but if we want this to be the great place that it is to live, work, play, and invest, we all have got to bring our gifts and talents and treasures to the table.
Scan the QR code on your screen to watch the full interview and learn what Valerie thinks an inclusive St. Louis would look like, or visit hecmedia.org.
HEC has been bringing you positive programming and award-winning content for decades. Arts, education, culture, in-depth discussions, films, and more. All in one place, hecmedia.org.
We call it the ick factor. We try to mitigate the ick factor as much as possible. I think people are becoming a little bit more used to it.
Erica Barnell frequently helps people get past that part of her work. It's the part that involves stool samples collected at home and sent to her lab. Barnell is co-founder and chief science officer for Geneoscopy, a life sciences startup company that's developing non-invasive ways to monitor, diagnose, and treat gastrointestinal disease. Barnell's mission is to prevent colorectal cancer, the second most common cause of cancer death in the United States.
Such a preventable disease. If you catch it early, you have unbelievable prognosis. It's indolent, so it develops over the course of a number of years, starting as normal tissue and then advancing to a polyp and then becoming malignant.
And those samples she mentioned, processed in this lab, are becoming part of the solution.
Always talk about you pick up after your dog and you have kids. After you kind of go through a couple of those life milestones, the ick factor feels a little bit less.
For the most part, catching colorectal cancer early doesn't happen unless people are having colonoscopies as recommended.
We're really bad at diagnosing colorectal cancer in early stage because of the existing methodologies to detect colorectal cancer. Traditionally, we've been using colonoscopies, but patients are very adverse to that procedure because it's invasive, time-consuming, expensive. Our approach is to develop non-invasive molecular diagnostics that can accurately detect both colorectal cancer and precancerous lesions to help improve compliance with colorectal cancer screening and reduce morbidity and mortality associated with the disease.
The company's laboratory in Maryland Heights is processing samples for the clinical trial of its RNA FIT stool test.
The RNA panel specifically detects advanced adenomas, which are very large polyps that have a high malignant transformation rate. So the RNA FIT in combination both detects and prevents cancer through cancer detection and precancerous lesion detection. Our test would be recommended for anyone between 45 and 75 who is average risk for colorectal cancer screening. You enroll online, so we have a site where patients can go and enroll or ultimately can get a diagnostic prescribed to them. The first step is we send a kit to the patient's home. If the result is positive, we recommend that the patient go receive a colonoscopy to potentially remove lesions that we detected non-invasively. If the result is negative, the patient is cleared and considered eligible for their next recommended screening interval, which will be in about 3 years.
Barnell encourages participation in this clinical trial based on early-stage trial results.
In our recent clinical trial, the sensitivity for cancer was 95%, and the sensitivity for advanced adenomas was 60%.
Barnell is clear a colonoscopy is very important. She says the hope for Geneoscopy is to improve widespread disease detection and prevention.
My goal is to identify the individuals that need a colonoscopy and put those individuals to the top of the list so that they can get the procedure early, get the lesions removed, and not have to go through an unnecessary colonoscopy when their mucosa is fine.
For more, you can find the full story on our website, hecmedia.org.
Scan the QR code on your screen to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
Who could have known this baby boy, born 85 years ago in Shanghai, would grow up to influence not only the history of St. Louis, but also the fate of the world?
Well, you were in the Sierra Club by the time you were 12?
That was the first age you could join. And in fact, I've now been a member of the Sierra Club for nearly 70 years.
For almost 40 of those years, Dr. Peter Raven served as director of the Missouri Botanical Garden, overseeing 4 decades of unprecedented growth in its size and prestige. Today, he is the garden's president emeritus and remains one of the world's preeminent botanists, a tireless champion of sustainability and biodiversity.
The loss of species, which is really unhinging the living capacity of the world and its ability to support us, is not something that people really understand scientifically, and it's not something that people want to take their eyes away from their daily activities to worry about. And yet it poses a huge problem for us.
Now, Peter Raven's life story, driven by nature, is being told by the man who knows it best, Peter Raven, a globe-trotting conservationist who changed the nature of St. Louis.
We learn in the book that we almost lost you to the Smithsonian in the 1980s.
Well, I was trying to be lost to the Smithsonian, but they chose somebody else. And I'll tell you what, I'm really happy at the 40 years that I've spent, 39 years at the garden and 50 years in St. Louis. I can't imagine spending a more pleasant or happy part of my life than that.
And one of the things you brought to the garden to begin with was a master plan. Nothing like that before existed?
You know, when I got there, only about a third of what the 79 acres of the garden was actually cultivated, or what you consider a garden. So things like the Japanese garden, the home gardening center, the boxwood garden, the Chinese garden, and all of that, the Schnook educational garden, children's garden, all those were built subsequently. And the garden in Henry Shaw's day went only from where the Linnean House is to the north side of the mausoleum area. In other words, it didn't include his country house, which was near there. Had a tower, though, he could look out over his garden from.
Being the head of the garden, you lived at the garden for almost 40 years. What's that like, having that as your, I don't know if it's your front yard or your backyard, but...
Well, it's very good. You might think it'd be overrun with people, but it's not. And it's a very nice, good-sized house with a few acres around it, right down in the corner there. And
Dr. Peter Raven, thanks so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
It's been a real pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity. I've spent a great deal of my life working in one way or another to help improve our knowledge of Earth's biodiversity. To understand and appreciate the myriad species with which we share our planet. I've experienced great joy in discovering more and more about our rich biological heritage. That's a legacy that's the product of billions of years of evolution. At the same time, however, there's been an inescapable element of tragedy and sadness in recognizing that the more we know about what we have biologically, the more acutely we become aware of what we're losing and how quickly it is disappearing.
Scan the QR code on your screen with your phone's camera to watch the full interview and find out the unique way he remembered all of the details from his years at the garden. Or just head to hecmedia.org. A night in the life of a jazz artist. Later on Spotlight.
Henry Shaw founded the Missouri Botanical Garden, one of the first of its kind in the country and one of the best of its kind in the world. But Henry Shaw was not a botanist. He was a businessman.
There's no sign that he was passionate about botany, but simply that he liked gardens and parks and green space and people's enjoyment and regarded them as an important and natural part of life.
Henry Shaw's favorite flower was the simple rose, but he was a complex man, an extremely private person who devoted the last half of his life to the public good. He spoke 7 languages, considered punctuality a virtue, and was said to have been the city's finest mathematician. But Henry Shaw was not from St. Louis. He was an Englishman who came to America in 1819 at the age of 19, with big dreams but little else. At first, Shaw thought New Orleans would be the place to make a fortune, selling cutlery forged at his family's ironworks back home. But when he traveled up the Mississippi on the Maid of Orleans, Shaw found St. Louis a better prospect. At the time, the city was a simple frontier village just a few blocks deep, but full of money-making possibilities, and Henry Shaw found a good one, selling hardware to pioneers headed west. Within 2 decades, Shaw was living the American dream, a century before the phrase was coined.
Turned out that by the time he was 40 years old, he had $250,000 in the bank. That might not sound like much, but that was a fortune in those days.
He says he's made as much money as anyone would need to make. He steps away from that business, and he decides that he's going to live the life of a gentleman.
Shaw owned a townhouse in the city, but built another house in the country, complete with an observation tower overlooking the grove of trees surrounding the house. He called his estate Tower Grove.
What we find it hard to realize now is that the country house was 3 miles outside of the edge of the built-up part of the city, so it took a 3-mile ride on horseback to get out here.
During the early years of his retirement, Shaw spent very little time living in St. Louis, choosing instead to make 3 grand tours of the world. His final trip included a visit to the spectacular gardens at the English estate known as Chatsworth.
It's really there that he gets this idea that when he comes home, he's going to not only create his own garden at his country estate, but that he needs to up his game and create a garden for the citizens of St. Louis and the world.
Through the years, the Missouri Botanical Garden has remained a place of treasured memories for the old and new adventures for the young. On average, it draws almost 1 million visitors a year and is widely considered one of the 3 best botanical gardens in the world, with one of the largest herbariums in the world and a research staff active in 35 countries. Although Henry Shaw the man has been gone for more than a century, his legacy continues to be celebrated beyond the garden. After all, it sits on Shaw Boulevard, across from the Word at Shaw Church, located in the former Shaw Methodist Church, in the Shaw neighborhood.
Scan the QR code on your screen to view the full exclusive documentary or visit hecmedia.org.
With every stroke of the bow, every stroke of the brush, with every stroke of genius, the arts make life in St. Louis richer, not just emotionally, but also economically. In our region, the arts create almost $600 million a year in economic activity, supporting more than 19,000 jobs, generating almost $60 million for state and local governments, with almost 12 million annual arts-related visits. That's more than all St. Louis sporting events combined. Whether in a park, on a street, or a wall, experimental or a classic, the arts deserve our support because the arts help support us. HEC Media is proud to be our region's home for arts, education, and culture because in St. Louis, the arts mean business.
In June of 2021, the St. Louis Art Museum appointed a new director, Min Jung Kim, as the first woman, the first person of color, and the first immigrant to lead the institution in its 142-year history.
It is a deep and a profound honor to become the next Barbara B. Taylor, director of the St. Louis Art Museum, one of the most prestigious museums in the country, known for its world-class collection, featuring an impressive breadth and depth within the encyclopedic scope and quality of the collection. It has nationally and internationally recognized scholars, an extraordinary, dedicated, and talented team, and it is a museum that continues to recognize the importance of its role and its engagement with the community as part of its long and distinguished history. In short, the St. Louis Art Museum is truly a remarkable institution. But perhaps what is most remarkable is that as a well-established institution that is so highly regarded in the field, the St. Louis Art Museum recognizes that every great institution must continue to evolve and is genuinely open to continued inquiry and change rather than a desire to remain static. The way I see it, the extraordinary strengths of the St. Louis Art Museum and the position of stability is merely a starting point from which to build upon and expand the museum's role in St. Louis to deepen our engagement with the community with more partnerships and collaborations, and to be a museum that is even more meaningful, more impactful, and quite frankly, more relevant to the very community in which we live and ultimately for whom we serve.
Kim is taking over for Brent Benjamin, director since 1999, who is retiring this year. This was his advice to his yet-to-be-named successor in an exclusive one-on-one interview with HEC's Dennis Riggs.
St. Louis is not a place that reveals itself very readily. It takes time. Once you start to scratch the surface, it's a fascinating place. I have really enjoyed living here. A fascinating place architecturally. It's a fascinating place art historically. It's a fascinating place in civic terms. I think that I would say probably take your time and get to know the context.
Scan the QR code on your screen to watch the full interview with Brent Benjamin or visit hecmedia.org.
You can find the stories featured in today's show along with past episodes and more at hecmedia.org/spotlight.
Please welcome to the Jazz St. Louis stage, Tim Warfield Organ Group featuring Terell, Stafford.
Only the privileged few can call a stage their office. Jazz trumpeter Terell Stafford and tenor saxophonist Tim Warfield are in St. Louis for a live performance.
For me, it's the pinnacle of everything. When that ball goes up or that tempo is counted off, I feel flurry, and that flurry gets, my adrenaline gets pumped up. I feel all this energy come through me. Well, I still get nervous, and I'm proud to get nervous because for me, being nervous means I care.
Considered among the best in their field, Stafford and Warfield have literally grown up together in the jazz business. Their chemistry is evident when they play. And their collaboration on stage produces a rich fabric that comprises the foundation of the jazz genre.
From the first song to the last song, there's a story that's been told, no different by many of the jazz masters. Our solos should tell us a lyrical story. They should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that makes a complete idea.
And for every story told, there is an audience.
It's all about what I can share from my soul and spirit and pass along to someone in the audience.
But music is one of the oldest rituals of commune that we have. You want everybody to just have that sort of deep connection.
Mission accomplished with tonight's crowd at the Faring Jazz Bistro, a venue known for its patrons because of their knowledge and appreciation for jazz.
I love coming here, and I think it's directly related to the rich heritage, jazz heritage, that St. Louis has. There's a certain sort of pride and understanding that happens.
They come to this place for the music. They come for that sole purpose alone. And you can feel the joy, you can feel the intellect. That's what's amazing to me. Because you can feel that people know what they're listening to. It's just not entertainment. It's a celebration.
That's the essence of the creativity, is the interplay, the give and take between the artists themselves and the give and take between the artists and the audience. That's really what makes live jazz so exciting and so meaningful.
John Coltrane once said, "My music is the spiritual expression of what I am, my faith, my knowledge, my being." When you begin to see the possibilities of music, you desire to do something really good for people. I want to speak to their souls.
It's been a great run every night because of our audiences. Audiences are off the chain for jazz in St. Louis. So,
no matter how you feel, you play like it's your last time to play. Because these people don't have to come hear you. As my grandmother used to tell me, you're on this planet to heal. You've been given an instrument to heal souls.
If you're an artist, that you should have the intellect to be able to entertain people and play and create music that's challenging at the same time.
Another night is in the books. Another perk for this job is applause.
I think it's a beautiful thing because the ovation and the applause is thank you.
Mission accomplished. Because I came there for them.
And it gets to be very, very spiritual in a way to say, there's nothing more I can do but give thanks.
Next week, how bookstores got creative during COVID. Plus, inside the circus-themed event at the Butterfly House. Thanks for watching Spotlight. Join us next Sunday at 9:30 a.m. on KPLR 11.